see you guys in the dark.
My family and I are quite religious, and up until turning 18, they insisted upon taking me to our local Sikh temple every single Sunday. Since then, I go very irregularly, but over a period of a couple of months, 2 years ago, when I was 23, I was going every week due to various family functions. As it is a small temple, I've also known of the people that are always there, from the kitchen helpers to the priests. There never really was anyone new there. So it was quite interesting when a new priest, a man in his late 50s, had joined the congregation, having come over from India. My grandfather, also a priest in our local temple, had personally helped him obtain a visa, having known him from when he lived there in his younger years. When my great-uncle died a few months after he arrived, he even took the lead at his funeral. He quickly became popular with everyone else. He was forever talking to people and seemed like a very nice man. He was always smiling and laughing, telling jokes, and was popular with everyone. My mom one day pointed out to me that he was a very touchy-feely with the kids. Like he was always tickling them and picking them up, even the kids that were too old to be picked up. From that moment onwards, I was very conscious of this fact, and it was odd how often he would take up the opportunity to do so. I come from a big family and have countless cousins, 2 of them who were sisters, and were 5 and 7 at the time. I had noticed were often in his presence. Their parents were quite happy for them to run around the temple and do as they wished, something which, when growing up, my parents had forbidden me to do. I personally felt at the time like running around somewhere at such a young age, and being out of sight of your parents was not right at all. But I had no say in what they were, and what they were not allowed to do. One Sunday, my cousins both came downstairs. The older one is crying like crazy, something I've not seen her do since she was very little. It was out of character for her to get upset. Her parents were trying to find out what had happened, but she wouldn't stop crying to speak. I managed to find the younger one and asked her what had happened. She said that she didn't know, but that she had seen her sister come out of the priest's room. He lived in the temple and had a bedroom upstairs, and was crying, so she brought her downstairs. Immediately this set off alarm bells, so I told my mom, and she spoke to my cousin's family about it. Now, coming from an Asian family, there is so much honor bullshit that is prevalent in the culture. From that point on, her family went quiet. They stopped coming around to our house and disappeared from the temple on Sundays. The priest was still in his job. My mom and I were both at a loss of what to do. Without speaking to my cousin about what happened, we could do nothing, and throwing around accusations without any evidence is an extremely dangerous game. About 3 weeks after the incident, and nothing having been done or said, we decided to visit her at her family's house. My mom rang ahead and said that she wanted to talk about what happened with the family and my cousin. This turned out to be a mistake, as when we got there, it was clear that they had told my cousin to lie. My mom and her took her upstairs in a quiet room to ask what had happened. She told us that he invited her into his room to play, and he had pulled a scary face which had scared her, and she got upset. We tried telling her that it was okay to tell us everything without putting any words in her mouth, but she stuck to that story. We were convinced her family had coached her not to say a thing. There wasn't a thing that we could do, and toyed with the idea that maybe that was the truth, and maybe we were just being overly paranoid. That mindset went out of the window when news broke that another girl's family had put in a complaint about inappropriate behavior around 2 months later. He was beaten up and hounded out of the country. He moved back to India, and my grandfather made sure to alert all of the local temples in the area about him. It burns that that scumbag spoke at my great-uncle's funeral, and that he did something to my cousin. I don't know what he did, but I hope that it wasn't something that she will struggle with for the rest of her life. I was about 8 years old and lived next door to 2 brothers around my age. Every Sunday they attended what they called Sunday school. It was a Christian event held for kids at a local elementary school in the auditorium. They would play games, eat lunch, sing songs, and learn from the Bible. I always wished that I could go with them, and one day my mom finally let me go. There was a bus that would pick the children up from their homes and drop them back off afterwards. I was so excited that morning, eagerly awaiting for that bus. When we arrived at the school, we started out playing games outside games like Egg on the Spoon and Tug of War. After that, we had something to eat. Then we all went into the auditorium to sing songs and listen to the priest give his lesson. After all of that was said and done, we were free to leave. Children that arrived by bus were required to wait around for about half an hour to an hour or so before our driver turned up. There was roughly 20 of us waiting. The friends I came with were off talking to some other kids, so I went to sit by myself, too shy to mingle. I've always been a really reserved and introverted type of girl, and in hindsight, this may have saved me in this case. The priest was walking amongst everyone, stopping to chat to some of the children. That's when he noticed me sitting alone and approached me. "How are you, darling? Why are you sitting alone? You don't need to be shy." I don't remember my response, or if I even responded at all. Sometimes I would just sit there and be mute when people talked to me. He proceeded to give me a fancy pen as a gift. I politely thanked him. This is where things got pretty weird. These words are imprinted into my brain. "Do you know how to get to heaven?" I shook my head no. "I can show you. How about you come with me behind the stage, and I'll show you how you can get to heaven." Being young and naive, I didn't at all think that this was creepy. No alarm bells were ringing. I guess he wanted to take me back there because it was a secret, and he didn't want the others to hear. I felt a little special that he had asked me. However, my timidness got the best of me, and I shyly declined. He seemed a bit agitated by this, and moved on to another girl. I watched, regretting that I turned him down. I hear him ask her the same exact thing he did me, except she said yes. I was pretty jealous. Why didn't I say yes? I wanted to know how to get to heaven. I watched him take her hand, lead her to the end of the stage, up the small flight of stairs, and behind the curtain to the backstage area. I never saw them reemerge by the time I left. Later that evening, I told my mom about what happened, and asked if she knew how to get to heaven. I really wanted to know, and I wished that I went with him behind the stage, like the other girl did. I can't remember how she reacted. All I know is she didn't let me do the Sunday school thing ever again. It wasn't until I was much older that I realized how bizarre it was. What was he going to show me? You have to die to get to heaven, right? So was he going to kill me? Or was I moments away from being molested? What happened to the other girl? Who knows? Maybe it was completely innocent, but why the need to go to a private place to be unseen? So many questions I'll never have answers to, but I will always wonder. Okay, so this event happened to me a few years ago in the park behind my house. I was about 15 and had experienced strange men following and talking to me, and many of my friends, so I know how to act around them and to avoid them. It's important to know that I live in a neighborhood where there is quite a bit of violence, drug use, rape, gangs, and occasionally a few shootings. This is very unusual due to the fact that I live in Australia and in the suburbs. Anyway, on with the story. It was a nice sunny Saturday afternoon, and I had decided to take my dog for a walk around the block. The park behind my house joins the next street over to my street. It's like a big loop, so to get home, you walk through the park. My street and the one next to it are also dead ends, and there are never any people around. It's very peaceful, but can get creepy at times. I used to walk past a man who kept a giant knife in his sock on my way home from school, and there have been a few times where the cops have been called around nighttime because of strange people in the park doing bad things. But during the day, it's pretty safe, and quite beautiful. As I reached the beginning of the park, I saw a priest sitting on one of the park benches looking up at the trees. I didn't think much of him because we do surprisingly have 2 Greek churches in our neighborhood. He was an older man, maybe 60 to 65, so if he was going to make a move, I didn't think he would do much. I walked past him with my dog, and out of the corner of my eye, saw his head turn to look at me. I brushed it off because, after all, I was the only other person in the park. But after I took about 5 more steps, I heard leaves behind me crunching, so I looked back only to see that the priest had gotten up and was slowly heading in my direction. At this point, I was a bit anxious and was starting to get creeped out a little bit, but I pushed my thoughts aside and just said that I was overthinking it. I kept walking through the park with about 250 meters to my house. The park is very open, with only a few trees which are spread apart, so it's easy to see everything and everyone. As I walked home, I kept looking behind me and seeing where the priest was. He was still following me, and his steps were in sync with mine at this point. I was creeped out, but I didn't want to run, just in case he started running too. I just acted casual, but kept a close eye on what he was doing. I was nearly at the end of the park, and about to turn into my street. I decided to look back at the priest one last time. This time when I looked, he stopped walking and smiled at me, but not a normal smile. It was a big, creepy smile that gave me chills. My dog even noticed what I was doing and began barking at the priest. My dog barks at a lot of people, so this was normal. But it snapped me back into reality, and I decided to bolt back to my house. As soon as I began running, the priest picked up his pace and started chasing after me. He caught up pretty quick for a guy his age. I was actually impressed for a second. He got close enough to reach his arm out and attempt to grab the hood of my jacket, and at that point, I screamed and was about to cry. I made it home, and luckily the door was unlocked. I got inside with the dog and was panting. I never told anyone what happened, but I continued to watch the priest from my kitchen window. He stood outside my home for a bit, trying to look in, but then he turned around and started to head back to the park. He looked as though he was mumbling something to himself. I don't know what he wanted, or if his intentions were good or bad, but weird priest in the park. I hope I never see you again. This story didn't happen to me, but to my older sister. So here's a little background information before we get started. My family used to live in a very small southern town in South Carolina. My sister worked at the Piggly Wiggly, which is a grocery store if some of you are not aware. Working at the Piggly Wiggly was my sister's first job, and she was about 16 or 17 at the time, and she worked until pretty late hours of the night, usually until about 10 p.m. or so. Her time working there was pretty pleasant, being a small town. Everyone pretty much knows everyone anyways, and no creeps really, until this one. This fairly young priest would come into the store all the time, and my sister would always get a creepy vibe from him, but dismissed it because all the other employees and just customers seemed to really like this dude. One night my sister was the last one to clock out, and when she was walking to her car, she noticed that the well-liked priest sitting on his bench that was across the street from the entrance of the store. He was just smiling, so my sister began friendly smiling back until she saw exactly what the priest was doing. He was masturbating right in front of her, and when he noticed her facial expression change in shock, he fully revealed himself to her. My sister was disgusted, and she quickly ran to her car and drove off. Once she got home, she told my parents. They reported it to the authorities, but nothing happened to the priest. My sister didn't see him around the store anymore. If not dead, there's no telling what that priest did before or after this incident. Being someone people usually trust, he could have easily showed himself or assaulted another woman. So, perverted priest, wherever you are today, if you are even alive today, please, for the love of God, don't ever do that in front of people ever again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.